Hi everybody, Giselle Grenier here from artplace.ca. In today's video lesson, we're going to talk about how to prep canvas paper for a detailed wildlife painting study. And basically, I'm going on the assumption that by you watching this is that you have, I'm thinking more than like you don't want to spend a lot of money on a canvas. You may not have professional supplies. So I'm going to kind of give you a bunch of different options that will all work for you. So I'm working with the Royal Essentials canvas paper, and it's not professional quality. It's not cheap quality. It's kind of right in the middle. And it's not actual canvas. It's paper that's been manufactured in a way to simulate the texture of canvas. Okay, if you want actual canvas, not a paper product, you need just to get unstretched canvas, just a canvas on a roll. So this is actually canvas paper. Okay, so it comes in the pad, 181 pounds, super thick. But the one thing with this, I took a bunch out of the pad. Now the problem with, really it's any branded canvas paper, unless the stuff is plastic type, is the texture. Okay, it's super textured. And also sometimes there's little inconsistencies with the paper. This one's got you probably can't even see. It's got bumps and stuff like that. When you're working with a detailed painting study, you want a surface that's as smooth as possible. If you're working on paper, that's fine. You know, like art journal or something like that, that's fine. But working on canvas paper is probably the closest thing you're going to get to working on an actual canvas, especially if you want to create a wildlife or landscape painting. Working on canvas is quite nice. So the gist of it is that you take your canvas paper and you make it smoother. Well, the easy way to make it smoother is just to sand it, but what if you sand too much? So I'm going to basically go over working with acrylics and working with gesso and actually do a demonstration, a before and after, so you can see what you get. Okay, so what we're going to do, okay, so I've got the canvas paper here. Now let me just go over. I'm not going to be demonstrating everything here because it's basically repetitive. Let me just turn these over here. That is going to be after. So working with any type of acrylics. So if you don't have, I should have actually started with the gesso. Ideally you prep with gesso if you don't have gesso. So you can use acrylic paint. So I've got the DecoArt American Premium Acrylic Paint. This is their new line. The DecoArt Traditions, which is slightly thinner in consistency than this. The DecoArt Media Fluid Acrylics, which is even thinner in consistency than this. And so these, to me, I classify these as my professional products. Then we have Crafter's Paint, and then which is the Americana Oyster Beige, because I don't have white, so I don't use this for my fine art pieces. An Americana Decor Chalky Finish, I would say use Everlasting, but I don't have that color. I ran out, so I've got Lace. This is really good for a ground, which is basically what we're going to be doing. Because it has a chalky finish, everything sticks to it. So this is a really nice product to use. Okay, so you don't want to use anything that's super shiny. You want something that has a matte finish to prep your canvas paper so that way stuff sticks to it. So if you have something that's a semi-gloss, not a good choice. Now with the with typical acrylic paints is that if they have a semi-gloss finish, you can put that down, then you can add, let's say, a layer of matte medium or a matte varnish, okay, to create that extra tooth if you need to. So for this particular lesson, I'm going to be using the Americana Premium Acrylic Paint Titanium White. So I'm going to put those aside. So that's that. And I'm going to be doing the actual demonstration of the strokes with the burnt sienna. What I recommend when we're going to be working with the prepping is to prep with gesso. Not all of you have gesso. So if you don't have the gesso, then you work with your acrylic paint. So with this here, what I have is the DecoArt Acrylic Gesso, DecoArt Media White Gesso, and DecoArt Americana Premium White Gesso. They're all from the same company. They're all interchangeable. So it's fine. It doesn't matter which one you use, but we'll keep it consistent, and I don't know, I'll pick that one. It doesn't really matter. All these gessos are fantastic. This one here, though, I have 3 different, because the containers are nice to handle. I've got one as is. I've got another container that's been thinned with distilled water, and another container that I left open a bit to thicken up. I've got a detailed blog post on why I did that. So I'm going to use that, move that aside, and that's going to be my strokes. So what I'm going to do, okay, that's raw. I also have one that's, oh, you know what? Let me do this first. Sorry, I had some notes on exactly the order I wanted to do this, but let's do it this way. So I took this piece, and this is what sparked this particular demonstration, one that was lightly sanded. So I'm going to take this one. This is raw. I'm going to make a stroke. Then I'm going to make the stroke on the lightly sanded one. And what I'm going to be using is just burnt sienna. And actually what I should have done is I should use the fluid acrylics because they're much thinner. Forgot to get some water, and I'm going to be creating this demonstration using 3 brushes. So this is going to be what would happen if you were to paint directly on raw canvas. So I'm using a little number 10 shader, a number 4 round, and a number 1 script liner. Okay, so making sure there's no water on the ferrule, and let's just, so we'll see all that texture. Okay, and typically when you're doing wildlife, you're working with, this one's actually, this isn't too bad. You're working with detailed strokes. Now the paper is uneven. When I'm doing a study on this type of paper, I mount it to a board. Okay, so I'm not going to get the quite fluid things because there's a lot of texture on here. Now again, it depends, it's all up to you whether you prefer working with something textured or something smoother. For me, I honestly prefer working with something smooth when working with detailed wildlife paintings. So you just sucked up all the paint. Oh, here comes Mia. A bit more. Touch, push, lift. Okay, so you can see the texture in there. I can get a few strokes in there, but the paint just kind of sits on the top. And now for the script liner, I can't get too many. And now, to be fair to the canvas paper, when you're using a script liner, it all depends on your environment. Okay, so I run out. Okay, so that's fine. There's nothing wrong with the canvas paper, so we just need to prep it a little bit. So what I'm going to do now is on this one here, this was just a reminder, I'm just going to lightly sand it. You should wear a dust mask anytime you sand, but let's use this. Our divider line. I'm going to go over the sandpaper in a minute. I'm going to use a baby wipe to wipe that up. Do not blow. You can use a tack cloth or a damp paper towel, like damp, not wet. Because if it gets wet, okay, so you have too much moisture in there, it's actually going to sink into the paper. You just want it damp to pick up all the dust. Okay. I don't know if you can hear this. You hear that? Okay. So let's do the same thing again. Much smoother. There's not a bit too much water in it. Okay, that's all right. Gonna blot the brush. Too much water in there. Let me blot that again. I'm just gonna get the right consistency. There we go. So I'm going to do this in a couple of spots because I still seem to have, there we go. So I didn't quite sand enough there, or I may have not wiped everything off. It's not too bad. It's not too bad. The liner brush, we gotta make it a little bit more fluid. Okay, I was able to go a little bit further with this one. Okay, that's not too bad. Well, if we think, okay, we took the raw canvas paper, and lightly sanded it. Not quite smooth enough. Can we sand it again? It's paper, so you're going to get to the point where you're going to be sanding down to the actual paper itself. Okay, remember, this is paper. This isn't actual linen or cotton canvas. You want to use the actual product, you need to go and buy the stuff that's on a roll or it's on a framed canvas and just cut it out and use that. This is paper. So one way to really prep the paper, and then you have to also weigh the pros and cons for cost. That you have the canvas paper, which is an inexpensive way to create a study, but then now you're going to be spending time prepping it. The cost is not that significant because you already have acrylics on hand, even if you don't have gesso. Okay, so I'm going to put this aside. I'm going to get another piece, and I get this piece that's got this bump here. So you've got your raw canvas. You're going to go through the sanding process. And that is just not coming out. So let me just look at that closely. That's a stain on the paper. Let's see if we can get rid of it. All I'm doing is I'm just taking the top layer off, especially if there's inconsistencies. I'm just taking the top layer off to make it smoother. And ideally, again, you should be wearing a mask with this, but no fan, no AC, no nothing, because you don't want the dust going into the air. Tap, tap, tap over a garbage can if you can. I'm going to use the baby wipe to pick that up. And then all I'm going to do is just use a baby wipe just to wipe up the dust. And you want to use either a 180 or a 220 grit sandpaper, nothing rougher. I've got some flecks from the baby wipe. And then what you can do from here, some baby wipe fleck there. Okay, so next time I'm gonna make sure I use a fresh baby wipe every time I do this. Okay, so you can use different products for the brushes. The bigger the brush, the better, to be honest with you, but not everybody has massive brushes. So for actual gesso, where I'm preparing a canvas, I like using the 1 inch, or you can even go to the bigger brushes, actual artist gesso brushes. The number 8 bristle brushes, you've seen me many times use this to prepare with gesso. I like the Majestic Oval Wash when prepping with acrylic paint because it's much softer and you get a super smooth finish. So I'm going to demonstrate both of these. So again, what we're going to do is let's draw a line. And let's first work with gesso. So because these work basically the same way, I'll do top and bottom on that. So this is the white gesso, and I should have dampen the brush. And then you're just going to take the gesso. And what you need to do is work the water into the gesso because it's super thick. Now, unless you want to work with a palette knife and make that you'll use a lot of texture, that's fine. But I want to make this smooth, so I'm going to see how much of this will cover that stain. Covering the stain isn't necessarily critical if you're creating a painting, but if the painting is very high key, so let's say very, very light, or you're going to be using glazes, then yeah, you want to cover all the stains. By using this brush is I'm able to push the gesso into the pores of the canvas. And this technique can be used on actual canvas itself as well. It doesn't have to be just canvas paper, but this is the technique that I'm showing you here. Now, I don't know if you can see that. See how that paper's curling? Way too much water. Okay, you can see how really fluid this is? Way too much. So we take a paper towel, we blot the excess. Don't rub, because of the texture in this. If you rub, all you're going to do is get the fibers of the paper towel. Oh, I got some burnt sienna in there. And blot the brush. And just go into more paint. There we go. And you're going to go sideways, diagonal, up and down, vertical, horizontal, however you want to word it, just to push that gesso into there. And you're going to smooth it out, you know, as much as you can. Then you'll let it dry. I'm going to put this over here. For the number 8 bristle brush, it's the exact same technique except I'm using this dry. And by using it dry, I'm able to push the gesso right into the paper. And because there's no added moisture, the paper's not going to curl. The problem with this, first of all, it's a lot of work on the hands. It needs a little bit more product, but you can likely get coverage in one coat, where the other one I need to do 2 coats. So think of it where we added the water as gesso that's super thin. So round and round, left and right, up and down. You want to get it all in the texture of the paper. And this technique, if you didn't have a gesso brush, it's the same as this, you know, mixing with the water and all that stuff. Using the gesso as is, the way I'm doing it right now, will give your paper a lot of strength. Takes a little bit longer to dry though. So you're going to have to make sure that it's dry before, really dry before you do your sanding. So once I've got everything covered, I'll lighten the pressure a little bit, fan it out. Okay, see the difference? Wet with curl. Okay. Now, you can use a heat gun or a hairdryer to dry this out. I wouldn't with this one here. Not if you're preparing for an actual proper study to simulate working on a canvas. Okay, you want to try to make the two as close as possible. I'm going to put these in water. And now for paint, most of you will, if you're watching this, you have paint, acrylic paint. So now I'm going to just dampen my brush a little bit, and I'm going to do the same thing now. And pick up a little bit more water in that, just a little bit. You can use a gesso brush for this if you want, or a bristle brush, but in case you don't, I'm showing you with this. The one thing you have to be careful when you're prepping, doing any type of prep work, when you're using a Taklon or a synthetic brush, it is a little bit more wear and tear on the brush. So just be mindful of the technique. Try not to push, don't do that, because all you're doing is mucking up the bristles at the bottom. Make your strokes go with the natural direction of the brush. mean, you can use a little bit of pressure. You can even go like this to push the gesso inside the pores. Really work the area. Okay, you want to make sure you cover everything. And once you find the technique and the particular product or the particular brush and all that stuff that works for you, if you can, prep everything all at once. That way, if you do this just before you're ready to sit down in a painting study, this is energy sucking. You won't have the energy to be creative after this. If mixed media is one thing because it's part of the actual process, but prepping, to me, that's creativity sucking. And just using a light coat, light touch I should say, just to finish that off. I didn't go to the very edges. When doing a study, I just like to tape the piece and then let it dry. All right, so I'm gonna let that sit, I'm gonna let that dry. Then I'm gonna show you the actual finish, meaning not the finished piece, but the actual finish of that particular product. All dry now. This one dried first. This one dried second, and this one dried third. And this one dried second only because it's the same product, or there's water, and the water evaporated. Let's just show you. Okay, see the difference? There's more shine on this one because the acrylic paints are semi-gloss. They're not matte. So in thinking as for a prep product, I know for a fact that the DecoArt American and Premium, the acrylic paint, this one here, this one here, this one here, basically all the paints, they're fine. Okay, the ones, hang on, make sure I covered them all because that, and that, okay, are fine for prepping if you don't have gesso. The other thing is that with this one here, you're going to need probably about 2 to 3 coats because it's very, very fluid. So anything that's got a heavy gloss, you got to be careful. But think of it this way. You're applying paint to canvas paper. Forget the gesso. It has a bit of a finish to it. We're not prepping metal or wood that's already had something painted on it or whatever. We're prepping paper. Paper accepts acrylic paints. This is totally fine, even though it has a bit of a shine to it. It's fine. Acrylics are also sandable. It's fine. Read the product label if you're not sure. All of these are fine. Okay, even with a little bit of the shine, because when you're doing your painting, you're going to be painting layers and layers on this anyways. I know it's going to stick. Okay, so keep that in mind. But if you're using a paint, let's say it's got a high gloss, not for prepping. Don't use something that's high gloss for prepping. So if you can, start with gesso. If you don't have gesso, then go with traditional acrylic paint that's not shinier than semi-gloss. A matte is best, but okay, either one of these worked. And also notice that the gesso one, thin, didn't cover the stain, again, which is fine because if you're painting a full piece, then it's not going to matter. It's going to be covered up. But if you're creating a little studies, around the area, then yeah, you might want to put another coat on that. So the paint's been put on there. What do we do now? You have to sand it again. You're getting rid of the any paint ridges that might have appeared. This is why you have to wait for it to be super, super dry. Damp cloth. And what I also noticed now with this one here, I didn't have complete coverage. You can see where some of it's white and some of it's kind of like almost the canvas color. You can see I don't have complete coverage on that. So my choice is to add, oh, that's nice. My choice now is to add another layer, but let's see, do we need to? And this will only come to you with practice. That's actually pretty good. That's fine. I like this one. And you'll know when it comes to how it feels in your hands. Now this one here is going to be a bit odd because it's not even. Okay, that one's fine. So right now as it is, they're both the same. Too much paint on the edge. That's me, that's not the paper. Okay. Okay, that's pretty good. Oh, too much paint. Oh, I'm seeing some. What's that from? That's dried guckies on the palette. There we go. Okay, this one here doesn't seem to be going as far now. It could be too because I got rid of a lot of the moisture in the brush. And I noticed the drag is down here. And do I have... Yeah. It's not too bad. So for the round brush, this is my third choice. And let's work with the liner. Now, oh, okay, well, I'm going to be doing the same thing like this. If I do it like this way, it's not a fair test. And I'm going to load a bit more water. The script brush is something that you have to really master with how much liquid you have to load. And I will have to admit that I haven't done a lot of script liner work with the premium acrylics because they're so new. I also don't like working with a script brush in the first place. I hear people outside, which means Mia's going to start barking. Okay, this one here seemed to have taken that a little bit better. Let me add more paint. Okay. Oh, that's interesting. Okay. So I'm finding that the liner work on this one here was a little bit easier because it was a bit more semi-gloss, so the glide was much easier. Could be too depending on where it was. Now, let me try with the round brush. Okay. It's fine doing all these strokes in that, but you actually have to do the wildlife stroke. And for me, it's going to be the actual fur. You know what? They're all the same. They're all the same. Just try to touch, push, lift here to create a clump of fur, or you can say clump of grass. I find that this one here is a little bit more textured. This is one we use with water. It grabs more of the paint. The paint doesn't seem to go as far. So there we go. All right, so canvas paper. If it's super rough, you can take a scrap, try some strokes, see how it works. Lightly sand, wipe that stuff off. Layer of gesso, dry, lightly sand, wipe it off. Then from there, you can do another test stroke. If it's still not smooth enough, you'll be able to feel it. This is still quite a bit textured here. Smooth right here. So when you're sanding, make sure it's even. Don't do it the way I did. Make sure it's even. So basically, you're going to add a layer of gesso or a layer of paint to make it smoother and smoother and smoother. And the more you add, more paint or gesso you add, the more you're filling up the pores. But make sure you sand, okay? That way you get the even finish. You will eventually have a layer of paint. There won't be any texture whatsoever, and that is super smooth. And that sometimes is more preferable when you're working with portraits, where you need perfect blending depending on your style. So that's basically about it. So that's all. Sorry, Chaos is here and she's eyeballing a piece of paper hanging off the table. So that's basically all you're going to be doing is just sand, paint or gesso, dry, sand, paint or gesso, dry, sand. So as many as you want until you get the finish that you want. Personally, myself, 2 layers of paint or 2 layers of gesso or 2 layers of paint. I'm going to use gesso. 2 layers is perfect for me when doing detailed work. That's it. But just because I said that doesn't mean you should not try using raw canvas paper. Try it and see what happens and experiment. That's the only way. I can only show you the different things that you can do, but the only way to figure out what works for you is to actually try it. So basically, oh, I don't have time for this. You know what? Take the time, because what's worse is you're going to sit down with something that you've never done before. You're going to get into doing a painting study and you're going to say, oh, why isn't the paint sticking? Oh, why can't I get my strokes perfectly straight? Oh, this and oh, that. Prep, test, and try the prepping. So when you do those strokes, the strokes feel good to you. And when they feel good to you, you're not going to be fighting the stroke because it's going to work. All right, so hopefully that makes sense. So I hope that you enjoyed this quick little demonstration on how to prep canvas paper. It's basically 2 ways of prepping canvas paper. One's with acrylics, one's with paints. And give it a shot. Get the finish that you want. And I'd love to hear from you on how many layers of whatever you used did it take for you to get a finish on your canvas paper that was acceptable for you to do whatever study you were going to do. I'd like to hear what you have to say. And you can share it in a private Facebook group, or you can email me. Links to both of those are at artplace.ca. So either way, let me know, or even comment below the video. Let me know what you think, and we can go from there. Alrighty, so I'm going to clear off my table now and get ready to prepare for the painting study of feathers on a heron. So I got to go prep some more canvas paper. Alright, so until I see you in the next video, stay inspired.